The waiter laid the kids' menu in front of me like I belonged in crayon and silence. My millionaire son didn't even blink when he said it. "She can't afford more." His wife laughed and angled her camera so I wouldn't ruin the frame. I sipped my water, folded my napkin, and smiled. Because before dessert ever reached the table, I bought the restaurant they were dining in. And I didn't leave a single seat for shame. All right, before we dive into this crazy story, do me a favor, subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. The lighting at Lark and Laurel was honey warm, bouncing off copper sconces and polished concrete floors. Outside the glass wall, Lady Bird Lake shimmered with twilight. Inside, the hum of soft jazz tangled with clinking glassware and low conversations. Ruth Delgado sat stiffly at the end of the curved banquette, her hands folded in her lap, thumbs gently circling one another. She wore a neat navy blouse, silver studs in her ears, and the wedding ring she never took off. The linen napkin across her lap was ironed sharper than the one at her place setting. Across from her, Adam lounged in tailored charcoal. He checked his watch, then his phone, fingers tapping restlessly. Brielle sat beside him, haloed in soft ring-light makeup and exuding a curated air of detached perfection. Her phone was already out, angling toward the bar's glowing shelves. "Mom?" Adam drawled without looking up. "You want to maybe split an appetizer or... I don't know." He snapped his fingers for the waiter, eyes scanning the room for witnesses. "Hey, you guys do the kids' menu still? She might need it. She can't afford more than that." A small burst of laughter came from the next table, a trio of venture bros in matching Patagonia vests. Adam smirked, pleased. The server, Kendra, by her name tag, paused mid-pour, her eyes flickering between Ruth and Adam. Her mouth parted like she might object, then closed again. She returned moments later and set down a children's menu in front of Ruth, the kind with maze puzzles and cartoon shrimp in sunglasses. A deep blush climbed Ruth's neck, but her voice came out even. "I'll have the trout. Grilled. No butter." Kendra blinked, caught off guard. "Yes, ma'am, of course." She took the children's menu and tucked it quietly under her arm like it was something shameful. Brielle didn't even look up from her phone. She was filming her cocktail, a frothy, peach-colored thing in a coupe glass. "Hold still, babe," she murmured to Adam. "The light's perfect right now." She framed the drinks and both of their faces, carefully cropping Ruth out. Adam leaned in, wrapping an arm around Brielle's shoulder and bearing a toothy grin. "This place is actually not bad. You like the vibe, Mom?" Ruth didn't answer. She'd turned slightly toward the front of the restaurant, where the host stand held a tiny black frame tucked discreetly behind a floral arrangement. Her eyes sharpened. Inside the frame, in small gold lettering, was a card. "Quietly on the market. Serious inquiries only." The jazz shifted into something slower. Ruth adjusted her posture, her spine straightening against the banquette. The blush in her cheeks had cooled. Her gaze moved back to the table, landing on the edge of Adam's cocktail glass, where condensation pooled like the end of a storm. Kendra returned to refill their water glasses. Ruth caught her eye. "Could you ask the kitchen," she said calmly, "if the trout could be done with lemon and rosemary instead? I've got a preference." Kendra's expression softened. "Absolutely. I'll make sure it's done just right." "Thank you." Ruth's tone was kind, but there was a finality in it. Adam rolled his eyes. "You're so particular sometimes. It's just food, Mom." Brielle scrolled without looking up. "She probably wants to feel fancy tonight." The waiter reappeared with a new cocktail for Adam, something smoky and overpriced. The business bros laughed again at something unrelated, but Ruth's gaze remained still, clear, unwavering. Outside, the lake caught the last of the sun, and inside, the weight of something shifted. Not loud, not obvious, but present. Ruth took a slow sip of water and folded her napkin with the kind of care only someone used to being underestimated could give. She looked back at the little black frame and smiled. Just a little. The hum of conversation faded behind her as Ruth followed the host past the open kitchen, where flames licked the edges of cast-iron pans and white coats moved in tight choreography. The hallway narrowed behind the wine room, then turned sharply to a plain metal door with a private placard. The host gave a quiet knock. "Mr. Lee, there's someone who'd like a quick word." A tired voice answered without looking up. "1 minute." The door opened inward. Mason Lee, sleeves rolled, apron streaked, stood over a counter crowded with inventory sheets, a cracked screen iPad, and a half-drunk espresso. His glasses hung low on his nose. One side of his salt and pepper hair stood up like it had lost a fight with a prep fan. He glanced up, then did a visible double-take. "Ma'am, if this is about the reservation—" "It's not," Ruth said gently, stepping in. "I overheard something about the place being for sale, quietly." Mason blinked, then sighed. He pulled the door shut behind her. "Well," he said, motioning toward the one guest chair buried under invoices, "you've got good ears." Ruth picked up the papers without hesitation and stacked them neatly in the corner before sitting. Her posture was unhurried, but not passive. She looked like someone who didn't waste time, hers or anyone else's. "No brokers?" she asked. He shook his head. "No offense, but I don't need slick hair and split commissions. I need peace." He paused, watching her face. "Been running this place 18 years. The last 3, I've been dreaming of an off switch." Ruth nodded, letting the silence stretch. "What's the ask?" she said eventually. Mason crossed his arms, more curious now than cautious. "Lease is stable, 10 years left with renewal options. Debt's clean except some kitchen equipment and a vendor tab I'm settling. You'd be buying the LLC, recipes, vendor contracts, everything but the name on the liquor license, which transfers separately. It's all in a deck, somewhere under this mess." He gestured at the papers, half amused. "And price?" He gave it. She didn't blink. Ruth leaned forward. "I can show proof of funds within 24 hours. No games. If I like what I see in the papers, I'll want a short escrow and fast close." Mason raised an eyebrow. "You speak deal fluently." "My husband handled timber contracts. I did the books." She smiled faintly. "Then I did them again after he passed." Mason scratched his chin, visibly recalibrating. "You from a group?" "Nope." "So just you?" "Just me." That seemed to strike something in him. He pulled a folder from beneath a tattered copy of Texas Monthly and handed it to her. "Numbers are rough but honest. I don't cook 'em. Just the food." Ruth flipped through the packet without flinching. Vendor contracts, aging report, profit and loss, labor matrix. She stood, satisfied. "I'll be in touch tomorrow." Mason hesitated. "Most people ask for a walkthrough, a tasting. They want the whole song and dance." "I've already tasted it," she said. "It's why I'm here." She opened the door, pausing only briefly at the threshold. "This place has heart. You can feel it before you sit down." Mason leaned against the desk, watching her go. "You're not what I expected tonight," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. Ruth made her way back down the hallway, past clattering pans and sizzling oil. Kendra caught sight of her, but didn't say anything, just gave her a respectful nod as she passed. Back at the table, Adam was deep in his phone, and Brielle was adjusting her lip gloss in the front camera. "Everything okay?" Adam asked, not really interested. "Just stretched my legs," Ruth said smoothly, settling into her seat. Her voice was calm, her expression unreadable. The trout arrived, perfectly grilled. Ruth took her first bite and nodded once, approvingly. She didn't look at the black frame by the host stand again. She didn't need to. The last crumbs of lemon cake had been scraped from Brielle's shared plate, though she hadn't touched it. Too much sugar, too many carbs, and the light was no longer good for filming. Adam had finished his whiskey, a limited-release single malt he'd insisted the server surprise him with. Ruth had eaten every bite of her trout. The moment before the check drop hung like the silence before a bell rings. Ruth sipped her water, unbothered. Kendra approached with practiced grace, black folder in hand. "Dessert was lovely," Ruth said softly, before the moment could be awkward. "Glad to hear it, Ms. Delgado." Kendra gave a warm smile, one not manufactured for tips. She set the check gently at the center of the table. Adam snatched it up like a reflex, cocky and performative. "Got it," he said with a grin, flicking the folder open. "Wouldn't want Mom to blow her garage fund." Ruth didn't even look up. She reached into her purse and placed a sleek, matte black metal card beside his elbow. The weight of it made a quiet thud on the table. Adam blinked. Brielle's eyes finally lifted from her phone. "Wait, what kind of card is that?" "Amex Platinum," Adam said slowly, narrowing his eyes. Ruth said nothing. Kendra stepped in, smoothly scooping up the card. "I'll be right back, Ms. Delgado." The quiet between them thickened. Adam shifted in his seat. "You're still using Dad's accounts?" Ruth's gaze was steady. "No." Brielle furrowed her brows. "But I thought—" "Don't," Ruth said, just firmly enough. Her voice wasn't angry. It was quiet strength, carved smooth over years of being underestimated. Kendra returned, placing the card gently beside Ruth's water glass. "Thank you, Ms. Delgado." The use of her full name was subtle, but intentional. Respectful. Ruth opened the folder and penned a tip that made Kendra's lips part in a silent breath. "You've been excellent," Ruth said, meeting her eyes. "Thank you for your care tonight." Kendra's spine straightened. "It was a pleasure." Adam looked as if he wanted to say something clever, but couldn't find the thread. Brielle scrolled again, the muscles in her jaw tight. As they stood, Ruth folded her napkin with the same care she had used to unfold it. She tucked it beside her plate, neat and precise. Outside, the summer air had thickened into that humid Texas mix of heat and honeysuckle. The night buzzed with laughter from the valet stand and the click of high heels on sidewalk. Adam adjusted the cuffs of his shirt and gave a sharp whistle for the valet. "Next time," he said, more loudly than necessary, "we'll do a place you can swing, Mom. Keep it simple." Ruth looked at him, really looked. For a beat, he seemed smaller than he had inside. The swagger sat awkwardly now, like a suit borrowed for a wedding. She smiled, soft but cool. "Next time," she said, "it'll be my treat." Adam gave a dry laugh. "Sure." But Ruth wasn't looking at him anymore. Her gaze had drifted back to the restaurant behind them, the glow of the pendant lights, the hum of the kitchen, the rhythm of a place that still had bones. The valet pulled up in Adam's black Tesla. Ruth stepped back, letting them pass. Brielle barely murmured a goodbye, already voice-noting her followers about the strangely chaotic energy at dinner. Ruth turned and walked the opposite way down South Congress, her shoes clicking evenly against the pavement. Her pace was unhurried, intentional. She passed the darkened window of Lark and Laurel, pausing only once to glance at her reflection in the glass. The little black frame still sat behind the host stand, but something about it looked different now, like it was waiting. Morning filtered through the slatted blinds of Ruth's small East Austin bungalow in streaks of gold. The kitchen smelled of cedar dust and strong coffee. A half-finished cherrywood cabinet stood near the breakfast table, its edges smoothed by careful hands over the past few weeks. Ruth sat cross-legged at the table, notepad open, laptop glowing. A single manila folder lay beside her, packed with parcel maps, tax assessments, and the kind of typed memos county clerks still faxed if you knew who to call. Her pen moved steadily. Square footage, zoning overlays, valuation upticks. Every lot she owned, quietly acquired over 2 decades, was now bracketed in bold, East Cesar Chavez Corridor. Land most people had driven past 100 times without realizing its weight. Her husband had once said, "Don't buy where it's hot. Buy where it's going to be." She'd listened. Now those lots had multiplied like seeds in the right kind of dirt. Her fingers hovered over the phone. Then, with a calm breath, she dialed. The glass doors of Barton Creek Community Bank opened with a hydraulic hiss. No grand marble, no towering ceilings. Just local art on the walls and a faint smell of lavender cleaner. The kind of place that knew your name and your business history. Trish Owen, short haircut, floral blouse, and readers tucked in her collar, stood when she saw Ruth step in. "Morning, stranger," she said, smiling. Still refinishing that church pew for your neighbor? Ruth smiled. Wrapped it up last week. Now I'm working on something bigger. They settled into Trish's office, papers already waiting. Trish didn't ask small-talk questions. She opened Ruth's folder and flipped straight to the land valuations. You've got leverage like people dream about, she said, and zero debt. How fast are we talking? Fast, Ruth said. I want to sign before dessert tomorrow night. Trish chuckled, not unkindly. Now that's a hell of a deadline. Ruth folded her hands. Can we make it work? Trish tapped her pen once, then nodded. Bridge loan on the land. I'll tag in an SBA term product for the rest. Nothing fancy, just what gets us closed clean. I'll loop in underwriting now. You'll have a conditional by 3. No fluff, Ruth said. Just clean terms. I'm not looking for balloons or surprises. You never do. Trish leaned back, studying her. You're not doing this to prove something to him, are you? I'm doing it, Ruth said, so I never have to hear a man smirk about my worth across a linen table again. There was no bravado in it. Just quiet truth. Trish nodded. Then let's build the damn thing. 2 hours later, Ruth stepped into the bungalow-turned-law office of Gonzalez and Tate, where ivy curled up the porch railings and the windows still had their original sash cords. The receptionist greeted her like an old friend. Devin's waiting for you. He brewed the good coffee. Devin Tate, still sharp in a blazer over jeans, held out a mug and a grin as she entered. I've heard rumors, he said, and when the matriarch moves, Austin takes notice. Let's not get poetic, Ruth said. I need the LOI, asset list, and clean title language on the LLC, plus a vendor clause that locks them in through handover. Devin raised a brow, impressed. You've done your homework. I lived my homework, she replied. He pulled out a draft from his folio and slid it across. Equipment, name, recipes, vendor contracts, all covered. Trish sent over the preliminary approval. You're buttoned up. Ruth reviewed the first page. I want escrow prepped, just in case he's ready to move early. You're really doing this? She didn't answer right away. Her hand brushed lightly over the edge of the paper, like it was the grain of good wood. I'm done being small in rooms I paid to sit in. Devin leaned back. Then let's open some doors. That night, under the soft whir of her ceiling fan, Ruth smoothed the LOI flat on the table and signed her name in blue ink, deliberate, clean, and final. She placed it gently in the envelope and sealed it. The kitchen at Lark and Laurel pulsed with the kind of chaos that preceded precision, burners roaring, prep knives pounding rhythmically, the air heavy with butter and seared shallots. The line cooks shouted short commands, their sleeves already stained before the first guest walked through the door. Mason Lee stood by the walk-in, inventory clipboard in one hand, a dish towel slung over his shoulder like a soldier's sash. His brow was damp, hair wild, but his eyes sharpened when he saw Devin Tate step through the swinging doors, followed closely by Ruth. Didn't expect lawyers in the kitchen, Mason said, voice dry. You'll live, Devin replied, tossing him a smirk. He gestured toward Ruth. She brought paperwork. I brought sarcasm. Mason motioned them toward the stainless steel prep table near the back, away from the noise. Ruth slid a small leather folio from her bag and opened it with calm precision. The LOI was on top, followed by Trish's conditional letter, with all the terms cleanly bound and tagged. Ruth placed the stack in front of him like a dealer setting down a winning hand. Mason didn't touch it at first, just stared, chest rising and falling, the sound of ticket printers buzzing behind him like a second heartbeat. You pulled this together in less than 24 hours? He asked. I said I would, Ruth answered, and I don't say things lightly. He flipped through the pages, first with suspicion, then with growing relief. His jaw slackened slightly when he reached Trish's letter. It's clean, he said. No sharks. No hidden partners. No noise, Ruth confirmed. You said you wanted peace. That's the offer. He paused, hand resting on the page with the proposed 48-hour escrow and 5-day close. A bead of sweat traced down the side of his temple. I've had this place longer than I've had most friendships. And you'll still have both, she said, but you won't have a heart attack in the kitchen before the year's out. He gave a tired, short laugh. Mason reached for a pen, then hesitated. You really plan to run it? Not flip it or slap a new concept on it? I'm not changing the bones, Ruth said, but I won't let the walls fall in either. For a beat, they just looked at each other. One cook passed behind them with a tray of soft-shell crab and paused, sensing the gravity. Then he kept walking. Mason signed. The pen scratched across the final page. No flourish, just a name, steady and certain. Devon reached forward, flipping the document back to its front and gently tapping the top corner. Escrow opens first thing tomorrow. Handover starts now. That's what she wants. Mason nodded, like a man finally releasing a breath he'd been holding since last year. What do you need from me tonight? He asked. Quiet staff meeting, Ruth replied. After last seating tomorrow, no announcement yet. You're really doing this, he said. Ruth folded the documents, sliding them back into the folio. Yes, tonight they'll order dessert. Next time, they'll be dining in my house. Mason reached toward the prep counter and grabbed a nearby napkin, a thick white linen triangle. With the same pen, he scribbled the date and both their initials. No one believes it until it's on paper, he said, but napkins seal the deals that matter. Ruth took it with a smile and folded it into her bag. As they stepped back out into the cooler evening air behind the restaurant, the sky had turned lavender gray. The hum of cicadas rolled through the parking lot like an old Southern hymn. Devon opened Ruth's car door, then paused. You realize if you pull this off before the weekend's done, it's not just a flex, it's a legacy move. Ruth tucked the napkin deeper into her purse. I'm not flexing. She slid into the driver's seat, hands relaxed on the wheel. I'm building the table they thought I didn't deserve to sit at. By mid-morning, the escrow instructions were filed. Devon had called to confirm with his usual wry tone. We're officially in the tunnel, Ruth. No turning back unless you want to hit the brakes hard. She didn't. Across town, Trish had already emailed, voice tight but efficient. Underwriting was pushing through signatures on the bridge facility and SBA loan. Told them you weren't here to browse, she'd said. We're going to thread this needle by sundown tomorrow. Ruth closed the message, stood from her work table, and dusted off her jeans. The cherrywood cabinet would wait. The afternoon sun hung high and hot as she pulled up behind Lark and Laurel. The back lot was quiet. Just a line cook smoking by the dumpster and a produce delivery van idling in the shade. Mason greeted her at the side door with a nod and an apron already stained. His face looked less pinched than the night before. Come meet the crew, he said. Inside, the restaurant hadn't opened yet. Fluorescent prep lights buzzed overhead. Stainless steel counters gleamed. In the lull between chaos and service, everything looked honest, worn, capable. This is Holly, my Sue, Mason said, gesturing to a petite woman with tight curls pulled under a bandana and a tattoo of rosemary sprigs on her forearm. She's run dinner service for 2 years. Pleasure to meet you, Ruth said, shaking her hand firmly. She doesn't miss, Mason added. And over here, Dan, front of house lead, keeps the place civil. Dan, a lanky man in tortoiseshell glasses, gave her a 2-finger salute. We've heard good things. I hope they're boring, Ruth said. I don't plan to bring drama, just stewardship. That earned her a small, approving glance from Holly. The door swung again. Kendra, not yet in uniform, stepped in carrying her server's apron over her arm. Her expression flickered when she saw Ruth. Hi, she said, tone measured. Ruth turned to face her. There was no tension in her stance, no chill, just directness. I wanted to apologize, Kendra said, about the kids' menu. I should have said something. You did your job, Ruth said. That night was about more than a menu, and it wasn't yours to fix. Kendra's shoulders softened, breath caught. Still, I'm sorry. Noted, Ruth said. Now let's talk about tonight. At a small table tucked near the pass, Ruth laid out her vision with quiet authority. Pre-service brief, Full staff. Keep it internal. I'll introduce myself, but I'm not swinging a flag. Tonight they get dessert. Tomorrow they get the future." Mason crossed his arms, nodding. "Understood." Ruth handed Dan a small envelope. "This is for flowers. Centerpieces for 10 tables. From La Rosa, tell Maribel it's for me." She turned to Kendra. "And these are dessert comp cards. From Patisserie Madeleine, 2 per table, final seating only. Let the guests think they're lucky, not manipulated." Kendra blinked. "That's generous." "It's prelude," Ruth said. "We're softening the air before we move the walls." By 4:30, Ruth had slipped out the back. She didn't linger, didn't micromanage. She'd planted the seed, now she'd let the kitchen heat grow around it. That evening, just before golden hour hit the plate glass windows of the restaurant, Brielle Hart posted a boomerang of her freshly manicured fingers, breaking into a slice of flourless chocolate cake. The caption read, "Back at Lark and Laurel for the city's best dessert. You know I only repeat what's worth it. Date night influencer life. Sponsored maybe." Ruth saw it an hour later, phone buzzing on her kitchen counter as she stirred a pot of lentils and roasted tomato. She smiled, just barely. Let her come back, Ruth thought. Let them both. The valet stand at Lark, and Laurel gleamed in the early dusk light, its brass pole ropes freshly polished, a subtle signal that something was different tonight, even if no one could name it. Adam Delgado stepped from the Tesla in a crisp, sand-colored blazer, no tie, shirt 2 buttons open. His sunglasses stayed on even as the sun dipped below the skyline. Brielle, already live on Instagram, followed closely in a white silk dress, phone tilted just right to catch the glow on her cheekbones. They were dressed not just to dine, but to be noticed. "Tell them we're here for the corner banquette," Brielle said as they approached the host stand. "And maybe mention I'm posting. They comp dessert sometimes when they see the reach." The host nodded, but before he could move, Kendra appeared with perfect timing, hair pinned tight, apron crisp. She wore red lipstick, not flashy, just intentional. "Right this way," she said, tone even, posture sharp. Adam glanced around as they were led toward the back. Same room, same glass walls, same jazz murmuring through the speakers. But it felt cleaner somehow, like the place had recently exhaled. At the table, Ruth was already seated. She rose halfway in greeting, her slate-gray blouse tailored, simple, her hair was freshly brushed, makeup minimal. A small bouquet sat in a bud vase at the center of the table, orange ranunculus and rosemary. It hadn't been there the last time they came. "Hi, sweetheart," she said. Adam blinked. "Oh, you're early." "I like the quiet before the noise." Brielle slid in first, nodding at the flowers like she was seeing a set piece in a theater she didn't remember auditioning for. Ruth didn't mention the cake post. She didn't need to. Kendra returned with 3 regular menus, printed fresh and edged in copper. "No crayons this time?" Adam asked, smirking as he unfolded his napkin. "No need," Ruth said lightly. "Order what you like." Something in her tone stopped him short. Not confrontational, not meek, just finished, like her patience had reached a place too settled to be poked. Brielle cleared her throat, scrolling absently. "So, we're thinking of maybe getting something catered next weekend. Adam's team retreat. It's by the lake, very casual." Ruth took a sip of water. "Sounds lovely." She didn't ask for details. Kendra returned with the wine list and offered pairings for the chef's menu. "The trout's fresh again tonight," she added, just for Ruth. Brielle ordered a Bordeaux she couldn't pronounce. Adam asked for the Wagyu. Ruth chose the trout again. In the kitchen, Mason's hands didn't shake. He flipped fillets with ease, wiped plates like ritual. Holly called times with clipped precision. The line moved like it had been oiled. Dan peeked into the dining room from the pass, eyes tracking Ruth, then Adam, then Kendra. Everything in its place. At the table, Adam leaned back, swirling his glass. "Not bad for a second visit, huh, Mom? You finally warming up to the scene?" "I liked it the first time," Ruth replied, "even when you didn't." He tried to laugh but couldn't find the rhythm. Brielle scrolled faster. Ruth watched them both, not judging, just witnessing. Outside, the city lights began to flicker on like stars given permission. The plates arrived like choreography, silent, seamless, gleaming with precision. Adam's wagyu glistened under a ribbon of house-made demi. Brielle's duck confit came in on a bed of truffled polenta, its steam curling artfully for the photo she immediately staged. And Ruth's trout, once again, was plated simply, with lemon rosemary glaze and roasted fennel. Not flashy, but perfect. Their wine pairings landed beside them. Deep red for Adam, bright floral white for Ruth, and something amber-hued for Brielle that she wouldn't finish. "This is actually really good," Adam admitted mid-chew, brows raised. "Like, actual flavor, not just fluff." "Glad it meets your standards," Ruth said mildly. Brielle was too busy filming to chime in. Hold, can you scoot your plate slightly left?" she asked Ruth, not looking up. "I want the composition to hit that light." Ruth complied without expression. A lifetime of adjusting for others made the motion effortless. Kendra hovered in the background, sharp and smooth. She read the table like a seasoned pit boss, attentive but invisible. When plates were cleared, she returned with 3 dessert menus printed on linen stock and sealed with a copper wax emblem. Brielle gasped, delighted. "Oh my God, these are gorgeous. This is new, right?" "Special for tonight," Kendra said, smiling. "Compliments of the house." Brielle's phone was up again in seconds, capturing the shimmer of the wax and the flicker of the votive candle behind it. "This is gonna kill on reels," she muttered. "Like major engagement." Adam raised a brow. "Is this a promo event or something?" Ruth set her menu down. "Not exactly." The words were calm, but carried shape, like she was teeing up something. Adam noticed, just barely. Ruth folded her hands neatly in her lap. "I'd like to thank the staff," she said suddenly, loud enough that heads turned at nearby tables. "Service tonight has been exceptional." Kendra blinked, straightened. "Thank you, Miss Delgado. I'll let the kitchen know." "Actually," Ruth said, standing now, her voice steady, "could you ask Mason to step out a moment?" Dan, watching from the host stand, had already clocked the shift. He slipped through the kitchen door without a word. The room had not gone quiet, but it was listening now. Mason emerged, wiping his hands on a towel tucked into his apron. His eyes went from Kendra to Ruth, then landed on Adam and Brielle. They were frozen mid-reach, unsure whether to smile or brace. Ruth nodded to him with quiet gravity, then turned to her table, and beyond it. "I want to thank all of you," she said, gesturing lightly toward the servers, the kitchen, the few curious guests who'd paused mid-bite, "for dining with me tonight." Brielle's head tilted slightly. "Wait, what?" Adam frowned. "Mom, what are you doing?" Ruth smiled, small, clean, unbothered. "As of this afternoon, I own Lark and Laurel." Silence, not the polite kind, the kind that reshapes a room. Mason didn't flinch. Kendra's eyes widened. Dan's posture behind the host's stand turned subtly reverent. Adam stared, half a second behind. Then, "You, what? You bought it?" Ruth kept her gaze on the room, not her son. "I wanted to ensure the staff stayed protected, and the kitchen stayed soulful. Mason and I agreed yesterday." Brielle's phone wobbled in her hand. She was still filming. Maybe. Or maybe she'd just forgotten to stop. Adam leaned forward. "You actually bought it? With your what? Garage money?" Ruth didn't answer. She simply sat down again, folded her napkin over her lap, and took a long sip of water. Kendra, still standing at the corner of the table, caught her breath and smiled. This wasn't a twist she'd expected, but it felt right. At the table behind them, someone clapped once, then again. Then softly, a few more hands joined in. Not a spectacle, but a signal. The tone had shifted. Adam's mouth opened, then closed. His fingers twitched toward his wine glass, then thought better of it. "Wow," he said finally, voice pitched somewhere between mockery and disbelief. That's a cute stunt, Mom. Seriously, very succession of you. Ruth said nothing. He leaned forward. But let's not forget whose company has the standing catering contract here. You may have bought the kitchen, but we keep it full. You don't want to lose that. Across the table, Brielle shifted in her seat, watching Adam a little too closely now. Her phone lay on the table, screen dim. For once, she wasn't recording. Ruth dabbed her lips with her napkin, folded it again. Then, Dan? From the host stand, Dan approached without hesitation. In his hand was a slim black folder, the kind only insiders knew meant business, not hospitality. He laid it in front of Ruth, opened it to a tabbed section, and stepped back. Your catering agreement, Ruth said, turning the folder toward Adam. You're currently at day 74 of a net 60. The balance exceeds $12,000, not including late fees. Clause 5C allows for immediate termination for non-payment. Adam blinked. That can't be right. Ruth slid a printed ledger toward him. Vendor invoices, postmarks, corresponding bank notices. He stared at the numbers, color draining. We've been transitioning systems. Our controller's been out on leave. That's unfortunate, Ruth said, but not my problem anymore. There was no malice in her voice, just precision. I'm invoking Clause 5C, she said, sliding the top sheet forward with a signature already on it. Effective immediately, Delgado Ventures' catering contract is void. Brielle looked at Adam, her face unreadable. You didn't pay them? Adam was quiet for a moment too long. Ruth continued, unbothered. I've already reassigned those event dates. A local nonprofit coalition is hosting a community gala here next quarter. We're comping the appetizers for their board. It felt like the right thing to do. A hush fell over the room. Again, not silence, just a sharp shift in energy. The nearby table, already half listening, murmured. Then a woman in a blazer leaned over to her friend. She's hosting for a nonprofit now? That's amazing. Another voice. I think it's that food security group. They do Sunday meal programs. Someone clapped once. Then again. This time it wasn't subtle. Brielle picked up her phone, stared at the screen, then slowly set it back down. Her nails tapped against the glass. Click, click, click. Adam flushed crimson. He opened his mouth, but the words caught in his throat, trapped between rage and humiliation. Ruth poured herself another half-inch of water, as if the room weren't watching, as if the air weren't charged. I'm not here to embarrass you, Adam, she said softly now. You did that on your own. Kendra reappeared, sensing the tone shift like radar. Would you like dessert, Ms. Delgado? Ruth looked around the room, then back to her son and daughter-in-law. Not tonight, she said. I've already had what I came for. She turned to Dan. Let's have staff meet briefly after final seating. I want to share the news directly. Dan nodded, eyes shining with quiet loyalty. I'll let them know. Ruth rose slowly from her chair. Brielle didn't meet her gaze. Adam kept his eyes on the folder, as if willing it to rewrite itself. The scrape of silverware and murmurs of polite conversation were still echoing through the dining room when the city inspector stepped out of the kitchen hallway. He was dressed like someone trying not to be noticed. Navy polo, plain clipboard, faded sneakers, but the staff saw him anyway. Cook stiffened. Dan went pale. Even Mason's steady hands faltered over a brûlée torch. Ruth didn't blink. She stood slowly from her table, smoothed her blouse, and walked toward him with measured steps. Calm, not performative. The dining room buzz faded behind her. I'm Ruth Delgado, she said, extending her hand. Owner, you're welcome to begin wherever you'd like. The inspector glanced at her, then the clipboard. Routine. Random, you understand. I do, she said. You'll find we're prepared. He started with the back hallway, checking food temps on delivery carts, walking line by line through sanitation checklists. Ruth followed beside him, never hovering, never flinching. In the kitchen, Mason and Holly had already stepped back. The burners were quiet, everything wiped down as if anticipating the moment. The thermometer on the walk-in read 2 degrees high. The inspector frowned. Ruth noticed. That unit was opened for delivery 15 minutes ago. If you'd like, I can pull yesterday's log from the monitoring system. He hesitated, then nodded. Do that. Holly retrieved the printout. Ruth handed it over without hesitation. He reviewed it, initialed a line, and scribbled something onto his report. That's your only note, he said. Clean operation otherwise. Good to hear, Ruth replied. We believe in making things better, not just newer. He signed off. Posting it now. He walked to the front of house, peeled back the old placard, and pinned the bright green sheet to the glass door. Clean bill of health, no violations. From the host stand, Dan exhaled. Mason let the torch hiss out. One of the dishwashers actually cheered. Kendra emerged from the bar, her face a picture of cautious relief. Ruth walked over to her, pulled a small envelope from her bag, and handed it over. Kendra blinked. What's this? Your raise, Ruth said. And a contract, stable hours, insurance by the end of the quarter. Kendra opened the envelope slowly, hands trembling. Her voice caught. You don't have to. I know I don't, Ruth said, but you're worth keeping, and I value consistency. For the first time, Kendra's professional mask cracked. Her lip wobbled. She nodded, a single sharp dip of the chin to keep from crying in front of the barback. Thank you, she whispered. Ruth gave a small smile. Go let the team know. We'll meet after close. At the banquette, Adam was still half staring at the black folder in front of him, though the papers inside were no longer visible. His jaw was clenched. Brielle was already slipping into her wrap, phone back in hand. But she wasn't recording. Not anymore. Adam finally stood. We're gonna head out, he said, eyes on the floor. Ruth turned, expression even. Drive safe. Brielle gave Ruth a thin, mechanical smile. Good luck with the nonprofit stuff. We're not waiting on luck, Ruth said. We're building something stronger. No sarcasm, just certainty. They didn't hug. There was no kiss on the cheek, just the quiet acknowledgement of a power shift they hadn't anticipated and didn't yet know how to navigate. The restaurant doors swung shut behind them. Ruth turned back to the staff hallway, where Mason had already gathered the kitchen team. She nodded once to Dan. Staff meeting after close, she said. We start setting the tone tonight. Dan smiled. They're ready. The final check was paid. The last couple slipped out into the warm Austin night, their laughter echoing off the sidewalk. Inside Lark and Laurel, the dining room had gone still. Just the clink of cutlery being reset for the morning and the faint hum of the dishwasher running its last cycle. Ruth stood near the bar, sleeves rolled just past her wrists, the way her husband used to wear them in his shop, not polished but ready. She waited for the back door to click shut after the last delivery driver left. Then she looked around the room and gave a single nod to Dan, who dimmed the house lights down to a soft amber. The staff gathered instinctively, line cooks still in their aprons, servers with notepads tucked in their pockets, barbacks wiping their hands with towels they didn't realize they were still holding. Mason stood off to the side, arms crossed over his chest like a man bracing for a long goodbye. Ruth stepped onto the small tile riser by the pass. No microphone, no clipboard, just her. I know you're tired, she began, voice quiet but grounded. But I didn't want to start this with a memo on the bulletin board. A few smiles, a few raised eyebrows. I'm not here to reinvent you, she continued. I'm here to steady the ground under your feet, to keep what's working, fix what's not, and build the kind of place people want to belong to, not just work for. She looked at each face, line cook to host, dishwasher to bartender. No one glanced at their phone. You've held this place together during hard years. I see that. I respect it. And I won't pretend I know more about your jobs than you do, but I do know people. I know what it means to be underestimated. I know what it means to feel invisible. She let the silence breathe. Mason cleared his throat softly. I told myself I wouldn't get sentimental, he said. But this team, they're more than staff. They're family. He looked down briefly, then back up. I'll be around for the next month, consulting, helping with the transition. After that, he paused, swallowing hard. I'll still come in, As a guest. Ruth stepped off the riser and stood beside him. And you'll always have a seat here. The room felt fuller somehow. Warmer. Ruth turned back to the staff. We're starting a quarterly benefit night. Profits from those evenings will go toward local hospitality workers in crisis. Tips included. Kendra blinked, then spoke up. Could we also do, maybe a mentorship program for the younger staff? I never had someone teach me how to lead. I just figured it out, mostly by screwing up. Ruth smiled. I love that. Run point on it. I'll back you. There was a small, collective inhale. Permission. Trust. And one more thing, Ruth added, turning to Holly, who stood arms folded near the pastry counter. You've been leading dinner like a pro. I'd like you to design a brunch program. Your vision, your call. Think of it as our Sunday love letter to the city. Holly didn't respond right away, then just gave a short nod, the kind that meant, I'll do it, and I won't let you down. A few phones buzzed at once, pockets, aprons, sleeves. Dan pulled his from his back pocket, eyes scanning the notification. He looked up, eyebrows raised. Food blog 512 just posted, he said, says, big changes coming to one of Austin's most beloved kitchens. A new owner, surprising, smart, and local as hell. Laughter rippled through the room. Ruth shook her head, amused. Well, she said, so much for quiet transitions. Mozart's coffee roasters mid-morning. The lake shimmered past the windows, and the patio was already half full of remote workers and caffeine lifers. Inside, the smell of espresso and burnt caramel curled through the air. Ruth sat by the window, back straight, nursing a black coffee in a ceramic mug. No laptop, no phone, just a thin manila folder beside her and the certainty of a woman who had stopped asking for permission. Adam arrived 8 minutes late. He wore designer joggers and a Henley like he wanted it to look accidental. His jaw was tight, and his eyes held the brittle heat of someone used to being the smartest man in the room, and finding himself somewhere else entirely. He didn't sit right away. Why here? He asked, arms crossed. Because it's public, Ruth said, and the muffins are decent. Adam slid into the chair across from her. You embarrassed me, Mom. You embarrassed yourself. His eyes flared. Do you understand the optics of what you did? I built a brand around strategic alliances and access. What you pulled was messy. It made me look like a fool. Ruth calmly opened the folder and slid 2 stapled packets across the table. Copies of your unpaid invoices and the contract termination letter, all filed. Adam didn't touch them. She added a third item, a heavy cream envelope sealed with a gold sticker. What's that supposed to be, another slap? Ruth leaned back. That's an invitation. From the Central Texas Food Equity Alliance. Your company's listed as a corporate partner on their homepage. They offered me a board seat yesterday. Adam blinked. They like the direction I'm taking the restaurant, she added. The non-profit dinner announcement went viral overnight. They said it was the first time a for-profit in Austin's fine dining space prioritized community without asking for press. She paused, then looked him squarely in the eye. I didn't ask for it, but I'm not declining it either. Adam's mouth twitched. He was trying to frame a response, spin it, salvage it. But no words came out. Ruth's voice softened, not with pity, but clarity. This isn't about you losing, she said. It's about me refusing to be embarrassed, about being treated like I should stay small so you can feel tall. Outside, a child laughed, somewhere near the railing. Inside, the silence stretched. Adam finally picked up the envelope and stared at it. I built something real, he said, not quite defensive, just grasping. I put in the hours. I know, Ruth replied, but so did I. You just didn't bother to look closely enough. She finished her coffee. You're welcome to come to the gala, as a guest. No cameras, no comps. Adam stared down at the envelope. What if I tank your bookings? I still have contacts, platform reach. I'm counting on it, Ruth said, standing. Because when you start talking about us again, they'll dig deeper, and they'll see everything I've done in the last 48 hours. She gathered the folder, slid it into her tote, and smoothed her coat with one slow breath. Adam didn't stand. He didn't speak. But Ruth saw it, just beneath the surface. That flicker of something old, boyish, shame-colored, human. She left without needing the last word. The halls of Gonzalez and Tate smelled faintly of eucalyptus and paper. Morning light filtered through the restored bungalow's original windows, and the front porch still creaked when the wind shifted. Devin met Ruth in the small conference room off the kitchen-turned reception area, 2 mugs of strong coffee already waiting. "You ready?" he asked, tapping the manila folder between them. Ruth nodded once. The paperwork was stacked in quiet layers: asset assignments, county UCC filings, title transfers, and a final signed release from Mason's original operating agreement. Devin handed her a slim black pen. "Every page you sign here," he said, "is one less excuse for anyone to question who this place belongs to." Ruth's signature was neat and deliberate. No flourish, just finality. The last page clicked into place beneath her palm. Devin stood and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Ruth Delgado. You now own 100% of Lark and Laurel. Its assets, brand, contracts, real estate interest, and goodwill. Officially, fully, irrevocably." Ruth shook his hand. "Let's make it count." At Barton Creek Community Bank, Trish leaned back from her desk, glasses perched on the end of her nose. "It's done," she said, flipping her monitor to face Ruth. The transfer confirmation blinked across the screen. "Funds closed, nothing hanging. You're now the primary on every line that matters." Ruth looked at the numbers, then at the small notepad beside her. One column was already crossed out in blue ink. "Then it's time to move to phase 2, she said. Trish smiled. "You're not the retiring type, huh?" By that evening, Dan had posted a whiteboard in the break room titled Q1 Profit Sharing Structure, Hourly Team Pool. Ruth stood beside it, breaking it down in plain English: how quarterly margins would translate to pooled bonuses, how transparency would be baked into the reports, how every dishwasher, runner, and server would feel what it meant to build something that fed them too. Eyes lit up, not with blind excitement, but with the kind of cautious optimism that only people who've been burned too many times can still dare to feel. And Ruth wasn't finished. "We're also launching something new," she added, "the Community Table Fund. Starting next month, we'll host a free Sunday dinner every other week. Families of food-insecure hospitality workers get first seating. No media, no hashtags, just good food and dignity." No one spoke at first. Then Holly stepped forward, her voice quiet. "My sister works doubles and still hits food banks some weeks," she said. "This matters." Ruth nodded. "That's why we're doing it." Later that night, in the quiet hush of the closed dining room, Mason came by for one last walkthrough. He handed Ruth a worn leather notebook, its edges stained with time and flour. "My mother's recipes," he said. "She was never a chef, but she knew how to stretch a roast and keep Sunday supper sacred." Ruth opened the first page, spidery handwriting, yellowed edges, a smudge of what might have been cinnamon or thyme. She closed it gently and looked up. "Thank you." They shared a long hug, quiet and unforced. No speech, just the exchange of something deeper than nostalgia, respect earned in the margins. That night, Dan posted the first official update on the restaurant's Instagram. "New chapter, same heart. Meet our new owner, Ruth Delgado, steward of soul food, staff dignity, and second chances. Brunch is coming, so is something more." The comments came fast. "Booked for the month. Never felt prouder to be a regular. You had me at profit sharing. Y'all are the blueprint." The taco truck by the river wasn't the kind of place you stumbled into by accident. It was tucked under a canopy of live oaks, about 100 yards off the trail, where the pavement gave way to dirt and gravel, and the river curved gently like it had nowhere else to be. The picnic tables were worn soft from years of elbows and conversations. No string lights, no QR codes, just wax paper, salsa, and the scent of grilled meat carried on warm air. Ruth chose a seat near the edge of the shade, where she could see the water but not feel watched. She wore jeans and a chambray shirt with the sleeves rolled just once. A pair of sunglasses sat beside her on the table, not shielding her, just resting. Adam arrived 5 minutes late, though this time she didn't think it was intentional. He wore sneakers that had seen better days and a navy hoodie with the sleeves pushed up past his elbows. There was no blazer, no performance. He paused at the edge of the table, unsure if he was supposed to ask before sitting. Ruth gave a simple nod. That was enough. They sat in silence for a while, just the hum of cicadas and the distant hiss of the taco truck's propane burner filling the space between them. Neither of them reached for a phone. Adam picked at the corner of a napkin. When he spoke, his voice was quieter than usual, rough like someone coming down from a long sprint. "I thought I needed you to be smaller," he said, "so I could feel like I'd gotten bigger." Ruth didn't speak. She didn't frown or lean forward. She simply waited. He let out a long breath, the kind that comes when you've said something you've been circling for too long. "In every room I walk into, I'm trying to prove I belong," he continued. "And I figured if you didn't belong there, then it meant I had." Still, she said nothing. Her stillness wasn't cold. It was steady, the kind of quiet that had carried people through worse. "I think part of me liked it," he admitted, his voice lower now. "Liked feeling like I was the one who showed you things. Restaurants, flights, money. Like I was the expert." Ruth finally lifted her gaze to meet his. "I never needed you to be the expert," she said. "I know," Adam replied. "I just didn't know how to let you be anything else. Not without losing something I thought made me important." A waitress brought 2 plates to the table, carne asada for Ruth, al pastor for Adam, and set them down without interrupting. Adam nodded his thanks but didn't reach for the food right away. "I've spent the last few days," he said, "watching you do things I didn't even know you could do, not because you hid it, but because I never bothered to look." Ruth picked up her taco, tore a corner of tortilla, and let the flavors settle on her tongue before she responded. "I'm not angry," she said. "I'm just not offering myself up to be overlooked anymore." Adam stared down at his plate. His fingers tapped against the edge, uncertain. The confidence he wore like armor was gone, replaced by something smaller, more human. "I don't know how to come back from this," he said. "You don't have to come back," Ruth said gently. "You just have to come forward." She wiped her hands and reached into her bag, pulling out a folded flyer. Plain cardstock, no logos, just the words, "Sunday supper, all are welcome. Service worker families eat free. Volunteers needed." She placed it on the table between them. "We're doing the first one next week," she said. "No press, no speeches, just food. You're welcome to come, as a volunteer, not a sponsor." Adam read it once, then again. "You want me there?" "I want you to show up. That's different." He didn't answer right away, but something shifted in his posture. His shoulders, always a little too square, softened just a bit. "I'll think about it," he said. Ruth nodded, finishing her last bite. There was no apology spoken aloud, but something more honest had passed between them, acknowledgement. And with it, a boundary. She hadn't rescued him, hadn't rushed to comfort his discomfort. She'd let it sit, and in that stillness, something old and uneven between them had finally begun to settle. They sat a few minutes longer, the river shimmering beside them. Then Ruth stood slowly and picked up her tray. "You know where to find us," she said. Adam watched her walk away, the flyer still in front of him, fingers tracing its corner like he wasn't quite ready to let go. The light outside had started to shift, amber settling into violet as the first cars pulled into the lot behind Lark and Laurel. There were no reservation books tonight, no influencer names penciled into the margins, just handwritten welcome signs taped to the door, translated in both English and Spanish, and a chalkboard easel that read, "Sunday supper, come hungry, leave dignified." Inside, the dining room glowed low and golden, stripped of its pretense. Tables had been pushed closer together. Votive candles flickered in jelly jars. The floral centerpieces were simple: wild mint, rosemary, and marigold from Ruth's backyard garden, arranged in old pickle tins. A little uneven, a little lived in. Exactly right. Steam curled from the kitchen pass, the scent of roasted squash, garlic rice, and slow-simmered beans lifting into the air like memory. Holly moved with quick confidence behind the line, plating with care and grace. Her curls were tucked under a white headband, and her expression bore none of the dinner rush tension, only focus and something else. Something like pride. Kendra stood by the ticket printer, calling plates like a conductor with rhythm in her bones. "Family style, table 3. Let's move those enchiladas. 7 top, 3 kids, 2 vegetarians." The dining room was full now, mothers with toddlers balanced on hips, older couples in their Sunday best, a teenager helping her grandfather to a chair. Laughter tucked itself into corners, low and wide. No one photographed their food, no one asked for substitutions. Plates were cleared, second helpings offered before anyone had to ask. At the back of the house, just past the bus station, Adam stood with an apron tied too tight around his waist, pouring water into mason jars with hands that tried not to shake. He said little, made no show of his presence. When Kendra handed him a tray of iced tea and said, "Take this to table 6. Ask if they want limes," he nodded and went. No cameras, no entourage, just the rhythm of service. Step, smile, pour, clear. Brielle never came. The envelope Ruth had mailed, unopened. The message, perhaps, too plain to spark interest, or too pointed to be ignored. Mason sat on a stool by the pass, a plate in front of him, his mother's lemon herb chicken recreated by Holly's hands. He ate slowly, watching the room with the kind of peace that only comes when something has been put down gently, not torn away. A few of the cooks joined him for a moment, stealing bites between runs to the dishwasher. As the final guests left, hands were shaken. Foil containers were packed with leftovers, pressed into grateful palms. Children were given cookies with sprinkles, wrapped in napkins like secrets. In the kitchen, the line was wiped down, pans stacked, aprons slung over shoulders. The tip jar, stuffed with what little was given by those who insisted, was emptied into a stainless bowl and counted out by hand. Everyone received the same cut, regardless of title or station. Ruth stood behind the bar, watching it all unfold, not directing, not correcting, just present. She accepted a cup of chamomile tea from Dan and leaned against the back counter, her feet aching but steady. Adam approached quietly, still in his apron, the edges flour-dusted. "I'll help mop," he offered. "You already did your part," Ruth said. "I'd like to stay." She nodded once, a small measured gesture. "Then stay." As the last of the crew filed out into the night, arms linked, quiet laughter trailing behind them, Ruth turned the deadbolt on the front door. The lock clicked into place with the finality of a sentence well constructed. No applause followed, no fanfare, just the soft thrum of stillness earned honestly, by hand. She stepped outside, the night warm against her skin, the air scented faintly with citrus and memory. Behind her, Lark and Laurel stood not as a monument, but as a house reclaimed, a place made by choice, not permission. She didn't need to speak the last line aloud. She just thought it, solid and certain. "They tried to seat me small. I bought the table and set more places.